How's it going, everybody? Nick Templin here with Templin Scouting, and today in our off-season prediction videos, we've got a pretty fun one. We've got the Calgary Flames. So if you've already seen my LA Kings prediction video, you might have some sort of an idea of what I plan to do with this team, as we did trade a very important player from this team to the Kings, and that was Johnny Gaudreau. So I'm just going to make sure that we have that all set up again. So it was Elias Anderson and a 2022 first-round pick headed back in return for Johnny Gaudreau. They could potentially get more for Johnny Gaudreau, I think, but getting this first-round pick is potentially going to be a pretty good pick from LA, because I don't necessarily expect them to be overly competitive right away. But LA likely gets a better player in Johnny Gaudreau if they can kind of sign him to an extension right away than they would have gotten with that 2022 first round pick anyways. So I think it makes sense for them. Makes sense for Calgary, who just kind of needs a new identity and needs to kind of move away from some of their key guys here. So we will make sure that we are signing Elias Anderson to a contract very soon. He's not going to be a big part of this team, but you never know. We might see the potential that New York once saw in him when they drafted him in the first round. So keeping that in mind, looking at some of the other players here, I do believe that Milan Lucic is a potential buyout candidate. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So that's $3.5 million for a few seasons there. But in all honesty, I think they're going to, that's probably not worth it. They might want to actually hold on to him then in that case, because that's a lot of money to be paying somebody to not play for your team. So we will actually hold on to Lucic. So then looking at the rest of the lineup, the next player that's going to go in a trade is Monahan. And now this is going to come as another kind of surprise to people, I think, especially Flames fans who probably hope that they can keep this core together. But I do have a kind of a deal in mind here for Monahan to be sent out. So actually, no, I haven't done Nashville yet, so I haven't actually done the trade for this yet. But I do believe that a trade involving Monahan and Matt Duchene could be potentially, something that could work out for Calgary. Again, like Elias Anderson, Matt Duchene's a guy who isn't performing overly well at the moment, especially not for this contract that he has. I do believe that it would be pretty difficult to get Nashville to actually retain any salary here, as much as I would like to do that, just because he does have another 5 years on his deal here. But when you're trading Monahan, it makes it make a bit more sense, because you're only gaining about $1.5 million on the cap here, and I do believe that this also allows Calgary to potentially get more than just Matt Duchene as part of this deal. So we can take a look through here, just kind of get a sweetener so that they'll be okay with taking on Matt Duchene. Potentially Tomasino, but I think he's looking like a really solid prospect coming up. Could throw in Yakov Trenin. Actually, he makes a good bottom six player there. And then maybe somebody like Igor Afanaseyev. And then they throw in a second-round pick in 2022. And Calgary throws in a third-rounder for this year, just to kind of make the deal a little bit more interesting here. And there we go. So Matt Duchene to Calgary, along with Yakov Trenin, Igor Afanaseyev, and a 2022 second-round pick for Sean Monahan, and a 2021 third-round pick. So reason why I like this deal for Calgary potentially is that, one, Monahan and Gaudreau haven't won anything in Calgary. They've had no playoff success, really. I believe, they've won maybe 2 series in their time with the team, but I could be wrong. It could be more than that, but only 2 series come to mind, against Vancouver and Colorado, I believe, were the 2. But anyways, so you know, you kind of get a new leadership group in Matt Duchene, who we've all seen has the potential to be an incredibly good player, and I think that kind of bringing him into a new situation could really change things for him. We could see him go back to being like a 50 plus, 60 plus point player again, especially if you give him the right line mates. I think playing with Matthew Tkachuk should be a really good fit. I do think that they should find perhaps you know, a new first line center kind of to replace Gaudreau, because I think Lindholm has shown that he can be really good either as a second line center or a second line winger. So we'll kind of take a look at what there is out there for that. Looking at the defense, you know, there's some talk that, you know, they might want to trade Noah Hannafin. We'll see. I'm not going to do that right now. I do think that if they can kind of hold this defensive core together, that it could turn out pretty well. Looking at the minors, guys that could be brought up for next season, not seeing anything jumping out at me. Dustin Wolf could see some playing time as a backup goaltender next season, but I think they will look to the free agent market for that. So looking at the restricted or unrestricted free agents that Calgary could potentially re-sign this offseason. So I do think that guys like Josh Levo will probably leave. Nikita Nestorov, I don't think they'll be bringing him back. Nordstrom would be a good re-signing, but I do think that it's pretty likely that he ends up elsewhere. Brett Ritchie, don't think they want him back. I do think they'll bring back Buddy Robinson. I think that they liked just having a guy that they could throw in kind of chippier game situations. You know, he's kind of an older fashioned type of player, but I think that he kind of fits what they want here. And whoops, I'm under the minimum there, so let's just fix that. There we go. So give him a minimum contract for 1 year. Just kind of use him as a scratch there. I'm sure that you know, they will want him back. Everyone else here, I mean, you know, they could bring back Derek Ryan, but I think he'll probably move on. You know, looking at some of the other ones, Michael Stone, you know, probably not going to come back. Zach Ronaldo, I don't think they want him back. So looking at the restricted free agents that they have, so looking at Dylan Dubé, that's definitely an important re-signing there. So going to go ahead and give him probably something in the $3.5 million range. He's a really solid third line center. He has good offensive upside. So, you know, I think that's a really good deal to bring him back. Sorry, I think there's one more zero needed there. So bring back Dylan Dubé. Actually, it has him listed as a winger. I do believe he plays center, but you know, he is versatile in that way where they can use him on the wing as well. 1 second, I'm going to move Afanaseyev down just because I don't think he's ready to go just yet. I'm also going to move Byron Froese down because I don't think in an ideal situation he's going to make their roster next season. Looking at some of the other guys here, Oliver Shillington, definitely a guy that they could potentially bring back. Still young, didn't play a lot last season. I'm not sure if that was because of injury or just because he didn't play, but you know, we'll just take a look here. Something in this range kind of is what he could be looking at. Actually, no, I think they'll probably want to look at him for less here. So let's 1, 2, 3. I think we need one more there. No, I think this is right. Sign him to just under $1 million there. He could potentially make the lineup next season, but at the same time, he isn't a lock to do so. So we'll just take a look at some of the other guys here. So there's Juuso Välimäki that they will definitely want to bring back, probably at $2.5 million is what they could probably get him on, just for like 2 years, and then this will be kind of a prove it deal, see if he can earn more, which I do think he'll be able to at the end of this contract. And then as far as other guys go, I think they will definitely want to re-sign Zagadulin, who could potentially be a backup goalie, but I think if they do want him to be like part of the NHL team, they'll probably be able to wait on him just a little bit longer. I know he's 25, but again, with goalies, you can wait until they're 26, 27 before you start them in the NHL, and they can still go on to have pretty solid careers. So it's important to keep that in mind. So just kind of keep him on a cheap deal there. And for now, he'll be listed as the backup, but I do think we'll try and solve that spot in the roster in free agency. And then there's one other player that we do need to re-sign, and that is... Actually, where did he go here? There he is. He's at the top. And for him, he can just make $1 million over 2 seasons. There you go. Now he can play third line center for them here. Probably going to want Lucic on the fourth line, but we'll just take a look at a few things in free agency before we start fixing up the lineups. So taking a look at some right wingers, potentially, some of the ones that have scored more goals. I do believe Brandon Saad will, actually it's hard to say if he'll get re-signed in Colorado. I think they'll want to re-sign him in Colorado, but at the same time, he is going to be tough to re-sign with them also having to sign Landeskog in the offseason. But I do think we're going to look more at like some of the guys who are natural right-handed. But when you look at that, actually, there's not a lot of great options there as far as goal scorers go. If you wanted to stick with a lefty, Mike Hoffman would be a really good option, I think, potentially. But if we look at the left-handed or left wings that are kind of right-handed here, Ovechkin's obviously an option, but again, I don't see any world in which he leaves Washington. Just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think what we'll do here, I do think that Mike Hoffman seems to be the best option here. They don't have to sign him to much more than what he was already making, I don't believe. Just $4.5 million, just increase it by a little bit. Get him on 2 years, and then sign him up. Get him on the top line there with Tkachuk and Duchesne. The only thing that could be a problem here is I know that there was definitely some turmoil between Hoffman and some of the Senators players while Matt Duchesne was there. That being said, I don't know how much of it had to do with them in particular, because I know that it was mostly between Hoffman and Carlson. Obviously, without knowing the whole situation there, it's hard to say whether or not this could be a potential problem, but assuming that it isn't, this could be a really good situation offensively for the Calgary Flames. And these guys are professionals, so potentially anything that happened could be put behind them. We'll just have to see how things go. So then, last thing we kind of have to do here is find a nice third line winger here for to play in Lucic's spot, because I will want to move Lucic down to the fourth line. So looking at the left wingers and everyone who's here, and just looking at points here, just going down a little ways. Foligno could be an option. I don't think Toronto will re-sign him. Barclay Goodrow would be a decent option, although I do think I've already used him in another one. Brock McGinn, again, could be pretty good. Yeah, I think I like Brock McGinn the most out of these options. Ryan Dzingel is also a decent option, actually. But yeah, I think I'll go Brock McGinn. And we'll sign him to... I think they could get him at less than what he's current... No, they'll probably have to pay a little bit more, actually. So let's go $225 for probably 3 years they could get him on. And then throw him on the third line, throw Lucic on the right wing there. And that's a pretty solid looking lineup to me. We'll just take a look at the defense. Just going to keep in mind that the cap space is getting pretty low at this point, so just going to have to try and look for somebody who's more of a depth defenseman than a big star or anything, somebody that they won't have to pay a ton of money to come have him play for them. So just looking through here, Hakanpää would be a decent option. He's a really physical defenseman. They could definitely enjoy having him. It would be really nice for any team to get Alec Martinez. He's a really good shot blocker and he contributes offensively. There's a lot to like there. Mike Riley probably going to get a bit of a pay raise compared to what he was making last season. Looking through, Derek Forbert has looked good in Winnipeg. I think they will probably be in a position to re-sign him. So just scrolling down, seeing somebody who could be potentially signed for relatively cheap here. John Merrill, that's a good option. Just go with John Merrill on, $950 for a year. Sign him as a nice depth defenseman there. He might make the lineup over Shillington. I'll just put Shillington in as the scratches for now. But I mean, he'll probably end up playing more than Merrill in the long run. I think for the sake of this, we'll just keep Zagadulin as the backup. They could potentially trade for one during the season if it's clear that he's not ready to play in regular NHL games. So, but for now, just because the cap is starting to get kind of low, that's probably the best decision that they can make for now. So, taking a look at the team, obviously it's very different. No Gaudreau, no Monahan, and I think that this offers the opportunity for Daryl Sutter to really get a new team in front of him. You could tell that he wasn't satisfied with a lot of the players this past season after he was hired. So, and I think that, the way his interviews kind of went, it definitely sounded like he wanted a new leadership group in here. Obviously, they've still got their captain, Mark Giordano, but, they can rely on guys like Tkachuk a little bit more now, Matt Duchene to be a solid leader, they potentially can get a breakout season from Elias Anderson. If that happens, they could be pretty competitive. But overall, I do think that this is a team that will potentially try and take a step back this next season, try and draft high, try and build up a pretty solid prospect pool, because aside from guys like Zari and now Afanaseyev, who I've traded for, Jacob Pelletier, who's pretty good, and Jan Kuznetsov, who I think is pretty solid. Aside from those guys, they don't have the best prospect pool as far as skaters go. I am a big fan of Dustin Wolf. I think he'll be a starter at some point. So, goaltending isn't probably a big need for them. But, and it'll be interesting to see what they do in the next draft. And I do think that it'll be in their best interest to be drafting high the next year as well. So, let me know down below in the comments what you think of my trades. Obviously, they're going to be controversial because you're trading, two guys that have been the best players on this team for the past 6 years or so, probably longer. And, so obviously there's going to be some people upset by that. There's going to be people who feel like the return isn't good enough. But, you do also have to realize that there's always the opportunity for players like Matt Duchene and Elias Anderson to really turn themselves around when they get into new scenery. Calgary fans know pretty well that that's exactly what happened with Sam Bennett when they traded him to Florida at the deadline this past season. He kind of looked like a totally different player than when he was playing in Calgary. So, again, let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you like this kind of video, consider subscribing and drop a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one.